the Empowerment Minutes podcast. This is Dr. Maureen Quinde, your host. I am a learning leader, educator, leadership and executive coach who is passionate about empowering leaders become leaders people want to work for. And I do that through my company, EMK Learning Solutions. So if you need help, I'll be glad to support you and your organization. So every month we have a theme, and this month's theme is that of heart-centered leadership. So we will be talking about heart-centered leadership today, specifically in the area of active listening. So if you're joining the Empowerment Minutes podcast for the first time, I would like to welcome you, and those who are already here, thank you for tuning in every Tuesday. I'm very excited to support you in your leadership, personal growth, coaching journey. So thank you so much once again. So today, let's get into the topic of active listening. And I really like the title of this episode. It's called The Art of Active Listening, Listening to Lead, Not Reply, and Transform Your Leadership. So we're going to be talking about ways that you can really actively listening with the intention of transforming your leadership. So let's talk about the art of active listening. So active listening is more than just simply hearing words, right? It's a deliberate process of fully concentrating, understanding, responding, and then just being focused and reminded of what's being said. It's about the present moment. Many times when we describe active listening, people think about body language, your tone, intonation, and all of that, which is great, but I would say that is pretty much a standard understanding of active listening, but you want to be able to go deeper, right? You want to be able to go there, really focusing and understanding what is going on and with the intention of providing that support. That's why you're there as a leader. So pretty much it's about setting aside your own agenda and truly engaging with the speaker. So what isn't active listening? What isn't active listening is it is not pretty much listening with your own agenda. It's not focused on you. That is not what we're referring to as active listening. You cannot be actively listening as a leader and you're just listening to yourself and just pushing your thoughts on the other person. That's not the way it works. So if you can remember, even in my own leadership journey, I've known many leaders where they would listen, but they're not listening to understand what's going on. They're listening just to reply. And they're listening to use the information that you're providing against you, right? And that's just terrible. That's a toxic environment, right? I know, we talked about toxic leadership a whole lot last year. So if you are the kind of leader who's listening to just reply or justify yourself or being on a defensive, that's not what we're talking about here. We're looking at ways that you're wanting to support your direct report, your peer, those that you're leading, right? And you can do that by really actively listening. It's not just about, passively absorbing sounds. Just to ask you a question, have you ever experienced a situation where you're actually nodding and saying, yeah, but actually your mind is somewhere else? You're probably thinking about Super Bowl. Exactly. You are not actively listening. So that is not active listening. We're looking at where you're completely immersed in that process. Okay. So with active listening, you have to be intentional. You're not just absorbing passive sound, like I mentioned. You're mentally processing. You're engaged the whole time. You're analyzing stuff. You're showing empathy with the speaker's message, right? And of course, you're tuning out every distraction, notifications, the things, even your mental sounds, the things that are getting in the way of you being completely immersed in that conversation. You have to shut those down and give your 100% focus to that conversation with a mindset of, how can I support this person? Okay. So now you want to be intentional, right? And then in the process, you want to also be reflective. You want to be able to ask them or paraphrase what's being said and say, this is what I'm hearing you say. And then, you want to ask questions. There is no way you can actively listen without asking questions. A book that I always recommend all the time is a book titled Good Leaders Ask Great Questions, right? And it's a book written by Dr. John Maxwell. So if you don't have that book and you're struggling with asking those clarifying questions, open-ended questions, I would really get feedback on the topic. I want to encourage you to get that book and see how you can learn to be able to, come up with those great clarifying questions. And so, just to reiterate, active listening is not simply waiting for your turn to speak or formulate your response while someone else is talking. It's not about firing back, like I'm going to get back to you on this. That's really not what it's about. It's not about offering quick fixes. Nobody asked for your input. You got to be able to pause and listen with the intention of supporting them. When they share information, you're not going to reply and say, "Oh, I've experienced that too," and this and that and that. No one asks for your opinion. Even if it gets to that point, you have to redirect it and say, just as an example, but go ahead and ask them those questions, just to help to support them. Okay, so focus on sharing what they're talking about without you bringing your own reflection or taking away from that conversation. Okay, so how can active listening foster understanding? It can be done in many ways, right? You want to be able to build trust when you when you listen actively. Your team knows that you care about them, you value their input, and which builds mutual trust, right? And then also it sets the stage, right? Because now you're doing that, then they will also be able to do the same thing, right? And you're creating that culture of active listening. And so this month is a month of love, right? And so how are you practicing active listening? How are you leading with love? You want to ask yourself that question. And so another thing that active listening does is it helps uncover so many underlying issues, right? So when you focus on your team's words, you're hearing underlying concerns. You're even going to pick up on things that they did not say, right? And which might not even be noticed, up front. So when you do that, you're able to uncover those issues and you're able to address them. It also builds on, open communication, right? Every team wants to feel heard, right? And so they're more likely to share their thoughts, challenges, and ideas when they feel that there is that open communication, and this definitely fuels innovation and problem solving. So these are some things that you want to consider, as advantages or benefits when it comes to active listening. So now, what are some things that you can do to, impact active listening on your leadership, right? You want to be able to create a supportive environment. It also helps with your decision making. A leader who listens well, also makes good decisions, right? That would reflect the needs and insight of the team, right? It also helps to boost morale. And it helps to cultivate those relationships. So when you're listening actively, to lead rather than just to reply, you create a culture where everybody's voice is valued, and the collective wisdom of the team is a powerful asset. So what are some things you can do? I already mentioned number one, eliminate distractions. It could mean putting away your phone, closing your laptop, focusing on that person speaking. Of course, making eye contact, your body language and all that. Practice reflective listening, which I've already said. One other thing to do is paraphrase and make sure that you're understanding what they're saying. Ask those open-ended questions, right? And then be patient, right? Give them the space and time. Allow moments of silence. Sometimes people need that time to formulate their thoughts, so do not rush them. So schedule time in a day where they're not pressured and you're not pressured to go to that next meeting. Give them that time so that you can be able to really listen actively. So also provide thoughtful feedback, right? Not just jumping with a solution. That's not what you're there for, right? Acknowledge their feelings and insight, and then together you can talk through it and then offer suggestions if appropriate, right? And now it's just not a one and done, right? You want to be able to schedule those regular check-ins to make sure that you have those opportunities to address and have those one-on-one conversations, and then making sure that they have been resolved if there are some challenges, and then you can continue to build on those relationships and conversations. Okay, so if you know that you don't have very good listening habits, you want to be able to formulate or create your new habit on active listening, right? In January I talked a whole lot about how you can create new habits, so you can go back and listen to those episodes, so you can learn some ways that you can create new habits. And so when you implement all the strategies that I just mentioned, you're not only going to enhance your communication skills, but also setting a powerful example for your team, an example where values of empathy, clarity, and there's also mutual respect, right? Is most critical with your team. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want you to remember that true leadership is not just about making decisions. It's not just about listening, but listening actively. It's also about connecting with your team on a deeper level. And so that's what active listening does. It's the cornerstone of that connection. This month of love, right, is a month of connection where you're wanting to build those great relationships with your team. So when you lead by truly listening, you empower yourself, you empower your team, and it also helps you in many areas, including decision making. You become and create an even more resilient and innovative work environment. So I would like to share this quote of today that says, the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood, right? The best way to understand people is to listen to them. So I'm going to leave you with that quote, and I want to thank you for joining me today on the Empowerment Minutes podcast. I hope you found these insights on active listening useful and valuable. I want you to make a commitment today to practice active listening if that's something that you've not been doing, and see how it transforms your leadership. Don't forget to connect with us on social media and share your experiences with active listening or any other topics on leadership, coaching, learning, and personal growth. Until next time, keep leading from your heart and your mind. This is Dr. Maureen Pender signing